So Dr. Stedman, we're back. It's group 1, and then this is the second portion where Shanetta was presenting on her chapters. So let me share the screen, and then we'll get back to it. Are you able to see this, Shanetta?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
That's where I was at.
Yep.
Perfect. So I was just talking about the developmental cycle, continuing it. The last thing I was saying is that the manager needs to know where the person is currently performing in order to help. How is this person doing now?
Yeah, and Shanetta, when I read this, I see a relationship between what I was presenting about with the R1 through R4. So
Yeah.
it's important to see, with the leaders to see what kind of, what they got, I guess, under them.
Yeah, exactly. I should have got that right because I have this in the next slide. So determining performance readiness. In order to assess performance readiness level of the individual, the manager must make a judgment call. They have to look at observations, past and current, to see where the person is at. People can be at any 4 levels of performance readiness, as this is what Drew talked about in the previous chapter. If a manager wants to influence a worker that is unwilling and unable, then she begins using controlling, directing, and close revision. So it's low performance readiness. If a manager wants to influence a worker that is willing, but is unable, or maybe they're just not confident, then the manager uses directs and supports. It's called selling, the desired behavior. That's low to moderate performance readiness. And then moderate to high performance readiness is if a worker is able to do something but lacks the willingness or confidence, then the manager will support the worker, his participating style to help them. And the last one, if the worker is able and willing to do something, then the manager merely delegates the responsibility to them, knowing that they'll do well. And that's high performance readiness. And then the next slide actually gives a visual.
Yeah.
Shows part of what Drew had, at the bottom there. The follower readiness, and it goes from R4, you'll see, to R1. And R4 is high functioning. I mean, they are able, they're willing, confident, everything. All the way down to R1, unable, and insecure. And then you see above that square there, inside the square, depending on where the worker is at, it gives a relationship that the manager should what intervention they should use, I guess. So like S4 earlier, they're high function, able, confident, then you just delegate. So the example Drew gave me that I failed,
It was a bad example.
which was S2. I said selling. After you said, I thought, or telling. You said telling. So
right.
If you're telling the person kind of what to do all the time, it's S1. If you're kind of selling, it's S2. Then if you're participating, it's S3, and delegating is S4.
And this is on the front of the book. I just realized I just looked at it, So
Yeah,
is on the front. I feel like I default to R2. Like if I'm unable, I usually try to pretend like I'm confident or willing. Like at my school, I feel like I'm that R2 person. Like if I don't know how to do it, I'm gonna be overly, and that's not a good characteristic necessarily. So I'm seeing people are gonna try to sell me here. Yeah, that's interesting. I like that graphic.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So it has successive approximation. So Rome wasn't built in a day. Nothing happens overnight. No one learns to do something immediately. It's going to take some time. And this is what this slide is about. A leader must first delegate some responsibility, and then second, reward as soon as possible once they see that desired behavior in the right direction. When I was going through this, I was thinking about my counseling background. It sounds a lot like it's behavior modification, which is what I do. So the two-step, it's like, what I do with kids. The two-step process, first one is reducing the amount of directions and supervision, and the second one was after adequate performance follows, increasing social and emotional support. That relationship behavior is known as positively reinforcing successive approximations. And then the next slide gives that visual to show that kind of two-step process of the developmental cycle. You can kind of see task behavior running on the bottom, and then relationship behavior kind of runs vertical, and then it has step 1 and step 2. So it takes small steps.
Right.
Basically. And then has a time and development cycle. There is no set blueprint or magic number for the amount of time it's going to take for the person to develop that desired behavior. It says time is a function of complexity of the job being performed and the performance potential of the individual or the group. The ultimate goal of the developmental process is to shift people towards self-management so they can eventually assume responsibility for motivating their own behavior. I mean, we're trying to grow leaders. Leader growing leaders. That's how I kind of see it. You want to grow teacher leaders in your buildings, and you want them to be, like Drew said, intrinsically motivated. You might start out with, doing the reward system, whatever, but you want to hopefully get them to the point where they are motivated within themselves. And then chapter 10. This is a situational leader in constructive discipline. Effective leaders use constructive discipline when people start to slip. Mm-hmm. Say a person is at R4 and they go to R3. So this is where regressive cycle comes into play. I know we talked about developmental cycle before, so this chapter talks about people that are slipping. So reasons for this slippage could happen because family problems. We talked about it could be a death in the family. It could be burnout. It could be a problem with a coworker. That a person could slip in their performance behavior.
Yeah, and you would somebody very differently if they were not performing from boredom compared to having a problem with their coworkers. So it's really important to distinguish those, I'm imagining.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm right. Agree with that.
That's a big distinction.
Uh-huh.
And then there's a visual of the regressive cycle intervention. And you can see, if you can see that at the bottom, the task behavior, the person was functioning at R4, so the manager was just delegating, telling them here. I mean, they're willing, able, confident to do the job. And then something happens, and their performance drops down to R3. And so that's an example of that. And so you would go from where you were just delegating to S3, which is participating.
Mm-hmm.
You would help more. Some things to remember when disciplining. If discipline is called for, then you use a leadership style that's appropriate for the follower's present level of performance readiness. So you have to meet them where they are. Make the intervention timely. The sooner the intervention, the better. That way, the chances of stopping the performance issue is more likely. You use an appropriate emotional level. Focus on the performance, not the person. Don't make it personal. Do your homework, be specific, gather all the details involved in the problem solving, get your data. You're not pointing fingers and blaming, you're not saying something about that person, you're saying about their performance, if that makes sense. And keep it private. There's no need to tell others you want to be confidential about this. And that goes for both the employee and the worker. I mean, the manager and the worker should be private. Helping employees who fail to meet their goals. There are a couple of things the manager can do. You can use behavior modification to change employee behavior. Managers can identify who's got the problem, then determine the leadership style that has the best chance of success, to intervene for the followers, and decide how to intervene for the followers. And a manager can use positive discipline. And that positive discipline, this was interesting to me, I read this part. It involves 3 steps. And the first one is giving a verbal warning. Mm-hmm. The second one is writing the employee up. We've all heard these things. I'm going to write, you wrote up. And then the last one, which is interesting, is actually giving the employee a day off with pay. But during this time, the employee is supposed to think about, is this a job for me?
Right.
Do I want to stay in the organization? Because this actually signals that this is like your last chance. You have to toe the line or you're going to get out.
Right.
So, those are those 3 steps. Implementing situational leadership. This is chapter 14. It just looks at managing performance, bottom line approaches to performance management, how to get the most from your organization. It says people, but the first part is about organization. Later we'll talk about people. This last chapter was kind of unique because situational leadership is the focus, but they talk about other models in relationship to it. That makes sense. So here are 3 that they talked about: the satellite model of organizational performance, positioning for future performance, and the 7 factors of performance. I kind of focused on the 7 factors of performance on the next slide. The one I kind of felt was, I guess, stood out to me more. And there are the 7 factors. Motive, what's the motive of your employees? Competence, feedback, goal, standards, opportunity, and means. And all these 7 factors go into performance, managing the performance of your workers. Then managing the individual performance. The 3 major steps to implementing performance management are performance planning. So setting those objectives and directions with followers at the beginning of the planning period and developing throughout. And then performance coaching, it's the day-to-day feedback and development activities aimed at enhancing performance. And the last one, performance review, and it's an overall evaluation of performance for a specific planning period. It's usually a year. And so at the bottom, you can see there's SMART goals, which we all know.
Mm-hmm.
I probably love. I've had to write more SMART goals. And so, and then feedback and the 360 assessment process. The 360, it should say 360 degrees. I couldn't get the degree on it. The 360 degree assessment process, also called a multi-source or multi-rater tool. It's a full circle evaluation of an employee's performance by evaluating, and I put in quotes, employees' skills, abilities, styles, and job-related competencies. And the chapter talked about this. It gave some pros and cons. Some of the pros was that the feedback lessens discrimination, bias in evaluations is decreased, people are able to identify the areas that they need improvement in. Some of the cons was that the feedback can be hurtful. People can be malicious and criticize, and some people cannot tell the truth on their responses. I guess in the final performance review meeting that you would have, the manager would have with the employee or the follower, there basically should be no surprises. When you sit down at the end of the year,
Right.
There should be no surprises. They should know all along what the review should be. The last one is the ACHIEVE model. And again, it tied in with situational leadership. And it's an acronym? Yeah.
Acronym. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Acronym. So the ACHIEVE model was designed to help managers do more than just identify what problems exist. It actually tries to help them develop ways to solve the problems. So A is ability, and it's knowledge and skills. C is clarity, understanding on the role perception. H is help, organizational support. I is incentive, looking at motivation or the willingness. And then E, evaluation, it's coaching and performance feedback. V is validity, rules, regulations, practices, procedures. And the last one is E, which is environment and the environmental fit.
Good
So
job.
I think that was my last one. Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. I'm sorry. One moment. Need the charger. Okay, guys, I'm sorry. Mine is chapter 15, and we're looking at implementing situational leadership when we're making decisions and building commitments. And the first thing that I have, we look at what things leaders are going to face. There are many things that leaders are going to face as effective leaders in today's society, such as time pressures, scarce resources, there's not enough supplies or anything like that, budget constraints, conflicting information, and it is necessary for leaders to rely on their emotions as well as their emotional thinking with all the barriers that they face. Thank you. That they face on a day-to-day basis. There are 4 types of decision-making styles that we have to take into consideration when we're looking at, leadership: authoritative, consultative, facilitative, and delegative. And when we look at authoritative, we're looking at, with this particular type of decision-making, is when the leader makes most of the decisions and he gets little help from the workers or from others. Authoritative decisions are commonly communicated with the phrase such as, "I'll decide that," and "Here's what I'm going to do." And I got that out of the Hershey's book.
I like your comment.
Yeah, I like that little comment down there.
Okay.
Let's read it.
I thought that was good. I'm sorry, y'all. I had to move. My family came in and I was downstairs. Give me 1 second if you don't mind.
No problem.
Get my
Yeah, that comment's cute. My way or the highway.
I'm sorry. Consultative is, with this type of decision-making style, the leader, he sort of gets decisions. He makes the ultimate decision, but he gets others to help him in the decision-making process. Also, some of the phrases you may hear is, "What do you know about this?" or "I'd like you some information on." But ultimately, the manager will make the final decision, after he's heard from all the followers as well. Facilitative. With this particular style is where the manager and the followers work together to reach a decision. So he's taking a lot more input from others, and they reach the decision together. The manager may use phrases like, "Let's pull our thoughts together and decide on," or "We've got a problem and I'd like your opinion." So he's asking for input with the problem, and everyone else is sharing and also helping in making the decision. That was a good comic strip as well.
Very nice.
Excuse me. The next one is delegative. This particular one, it uses, you all have already talked about the readiness, and it looks at R4, being on the R4, which is a high readiness, who have the experience and information needed to make the proper decision or recommendations. Some examples that you may hear, "This subject, please work on this and let me know what you come up with." So he's just giving them instructions and they do what they need to do. Hershey states that a general rule is that you can select the appropriate decision-making style by using situational leadership to determine who owns the decision. Then we look at building commitments. When we look at building commitments, we look at, there are several, we look at Kitley, Goldsmith, and Boone. They have adapted the situational leadership model to the decision-making approach that combines the leadership and decision-making latitude with following readiness. And with this particular model, it just says the most effective managers all share a set of fundamentally similar comments that derive from positive beliefs and behavior. And there are 5 different, commitments that we have. The first one is the commitment to the customer. The second one, commitment to the organization, commitment to self, commitment to people, and commitment to task. And when we talk about the commitment to the customer, this is the first and foremost important commitment that we have, and that's just making sure that the customer gets gets great customer service or whatever they're wanting, that their needs are being met. So also serving the customer and building customer importance is very important when we look at this particular section of commitment.
The next one is a question, Tanya. I'm just thinking, when it says to customer, I'm thinking, is a customer in education to us, is that parent? Is that, depending on, I guess, who you are, is that the parent? Is that the student?
I would say the student. I would say really both, though. But I would say first and foremost is to the student. Our particular focus should be on the student, making sure that they get the quality education, the quality service that they need.
I think it's all the stakeholders as an administrator, right? So your staff, your community, parents, but definitely number one is obviously, you got to be there for the students. So I think those are both right and good points.
Okay. And even can you go back one more? I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
When we were talking about the commitment for serving the customer, like I said, it's just making we give them what they're wanting, and building customer importance is just making sure that the customer feels important, as far as maybe calling them by name, or just making reverence to who they are and giving them what they need. Okay. Next one. Commitment to the organization. When we look at commitment to the organization, this is where we have the manager, their commitment by building the organization, supporting higher management, operating by basic organizational values. You can keep it on that slide. But when we talk about building the organization, we talk about means of presenting the organization in a positive way. Supporting the second one, supporting management, higher management, means just adding value to the organization, showing inspiring management, or also loyalty. We look at these managers' position in the organization by dual responsibility and taking on different challenges. And number 3, it says operating by basic organizational values. And with that one, we look at the lives of the values. Manager lives the values of the organization, especially during time times. We're going to make sure, things get done, no matter what may happen. Okay. I don't think I broke these down, but I may have. Okay, the next one is commitment to self. And with this one, the manager focuses on their personality. This is managers, excellent managers are seen as individuals who combine strength and a sense of humility. A good manager shows his ability to commit to himself by building autonomy, building self as a manager, and accepting constructive criticism. And when we talk about demonstrating autonomy, this is where the manager who acts as though they are running their own business within their own organizational unit, they take responsibility for most things that may happen within the organization, well, all things that will happen in the organization. They stand up for their personal beliefs. They're concerned with achievement of excellence, and a lot of times they tend to just take risk. The next one is when we look at building self-management, that reflects on how the manager projects his own self-image others. And managers demonstrate building the self by appearing confident and also assured in acting on their integrity, what is right. Okay. And then accepting constructive criticism, we look at, when you have criticism, someone telling you what you're not doing right, is just enabling you to become better in what you're doing, and you're able to admit to your mistakes, and then you avoid taking offense to those things that they're telling you. Next slide. Then we have commitment by people. Commitment by people. Hershey, Blanch, and Johnson wrote it best. Excellent managers display a dedication to the people who work for them. There are 3 activities that show commitment to the people, and they are showing positive concern and recognition, giving developmental feedback, and also encouraging innovative ideas. So when we look at the commitment to people, this means successful managers focus on the work that a team has as an individual group and display dedication to the people who work for them. And they also manage, these managers use proper leadership styles to help individuals succeed in their own tasks. Okay. And then the next one. The next one is commitment to task. This one is where we focus on what needs to be done. And managers can demonstrate this one by keeping the focus, keeping the right focus, keeping things simple, being action oriented, and also building task importance. And when we're looking at commitment to the task that people perform, making sure that you are choosing the right focus, making sure that they're keeping it simple, and also that they're building a task of importance. Okay.
All right, and Tanya, you're just so you know, you're sounding like real distant to me at certain points.
Emma.
So I
Yeah.
don't know if you're like farther away from the computer, but
Okay, I'm not. Let me. Can you hear me now? I'm turning up
it's
the
good.
volume.
You might as well
Yeah.
go for it now. It sounds strong.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Chapter 18 is synthesizing management theory, integrating situational leadership with the classes. And this particular chapter, we look at actually throughout the text, we have introduced several different theories, concepts, and research within our reading. And what we're going to learn here is about managerial grid and situational leadership. And these two models look they seem to look a little bit different, but they complement each other. When we look at situational leadership, we see that it's an effective manager has high interest in his people and also in production. When we look at the managerial grid, it draws behavior conclusions from an attitudinal model. We cannot predict behavior from this particular model. The leader's behavior is not just a feeling. The attitude has an impact on the followers' performance and their behavior. So within this model, however the leader's behavior is, it's going to affect, the workers. Situational leadership focuses on leadership styles and concerns for people and the readiness of their situation. The next one that we look at is the Likert, causal, intervening, and output variables, and the Skinner's theory. Both of these theories can be interlined with the managerial grid. Likert intervening variables, or Skinner's organisms, are similar to that they concern the people's access on the managerial grid. And I meant to put a picture, but I didn't, the grid. The next thing is the causal variables. This is where situational leadership comes into the picture. Situational leadership is creates the behavior by determining which leadership style is needed to match the performance readiness of others.
Right.
Then we get into Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Within this particular theory, it can also be used with both performance of readiness levels and the situational leadership. The person attempting to satisfy their psychological needs will be at the performance readiness level of R1, which, both of you have already showed that particular chart, R1. And then if we're looking at safety needs, it looks at R2 for the performance. And social needs, they're at an R2 or an R3. The esteem needs are at the R3 or the R4. And the self-actualization is a needs, will be at an R4.
Okay.
The next one that we look at is Hellsberg theory of motivation. And Hellsberg theory of motivation can be used by, used by matching the hygiene factors and motivators with the appropriate leadership styles and the performance readiness. And people who are more influenced by hygiene factors would match better with the lower levels of performance readiness. Individuals who are influenced by motivators will match better with the R3 and the R4 performance level readiness. Okay, the next one. Do I have my next one? The next one, that's not on there, but we look at also situational leadership and power bases. The power bases that the leader should utilize depends on the performance readiness level of an individual. A follower at the performance readiness level, which is an R1, requires the use of cohesive power. As the follower begins to move from the performance readiness level R to R2, the S1 and the S2, leadership styles are more effective if the leader has a connection and a reward power. I think that goes back to what you were talking about earlier. Okay, the next one is personality theories. Personality theories such as the DISC or the social styles can be woven into the situational leadership. We can also integrate personality types or styles with the situational leadership. These two models are 4-quadrant models, as well as they build from 2 axes. You have your first degree and then your responsiveness, which take into account the follower's personality type when delivering and receiving information. So that was chapter 15 and 18. Summing up those.
All right.
All right.
That's it. And we got done with 7 minutes. So I'm going to stop sharing here, and 7, that'll be our second part, and that's our midterm. So it's been a pleasure working with Shanetta and Tanya, and I'm going to stop recording now.
All right.
Actually, hold on a minute. I forgot how to stop recording. Oh, there we go.